Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin ma'danil judi wal karami wa ala alihi wa azwajihi wa zurriyatihi ajma'in. We continue our reading of Allama Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, and we were looking at his conception of human nature, or his conception of man, or his conception of human being. And one thing we looked at last time was Allama Iqbal's conception that the basic relationship between human being, between mankind and nature, is that of confrontation. So human beings are surrounded on all sides by the forces of obstruction. And human beings are given powers by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to overcome these obstructions. That's Allama Iqbal's view. And conquer the forces of nature and subjugate them to his or her own will. So imposing human will on nature, that seems to be the promise of God and the duty of humankind, according to Allama Iqbal. And that's why we classify him as Muslim modernist, because this is not an Islamic conception, it's a modernist conception, even early modernist conception. Even modernism is shy of today, but it wasn't when Iqbal was writing. So he's basically providing here an Islamic justification of modernity, or at least modernity's conception of human being and modernity's conception of the relationship between human being and the nature. So is the relationship between human nature and is the relationship between man and the universe confrontational according to Islam? Let's think a bit about this point, and then we'll move on to the next paragraph, inshallah. So is the basic or the fundamental relationship between human beings and the nature is that of confrontational. And obviously we have already talked about this conception of imposing human will on nature. That's totally modernist conception. Islam totally rejects it. But is the fundamental or primordial relationship between, obviously we are not denying that the relationship between one mode or one form, relationship between human beings and the nature can be confrontational, and that's what our modernity is all about, because the modern conception is that of the sovereignty of human will. So that's why you can't establish the sovereignty of human will if there are forces in the universe which are not subservient to that will. So we are not denying that there can be a confrontational relationship between human beings and the nature. What we are denying is that that's what it should be. Or even if this is the primordial relationship between human being and the universe, as far as the basic human nature and the nature of this universe is concerned. So, from an Islamic perspective, what is important in this regard are two things. First is the question of our station in this universe. What is our station in this universe? That is Maqam. This is something which is permanent in the sense that that's who you are. That's one thing, your station in this universe. But since we are being with limited, at least limited freedom, our conceptions about what is our real station in this universe can vary. As, for example, we have seen modernist conception is different from Islamic conception, for example. Or even Muslim modernist conception is different from modernist conception and Islamic conception. So that's the station. So understanding what is the station, our real station in this universe. And that will determine at least in part or in large part are what Germans call Findechlichkeit or Findechlichkeit, I think. How you find yourself in this world. In this world. Or what Sufia call hal. And that's why almost every language in the world is, whenever we meet, we ask each other, how are you? How is it going? Sawa. Oh, كيف حالك? So that's part of our how we find ourselves in the world. Befindlichkeit. How we find ourselves. So our hal, or how we find ourselves in this world, that's obviously a changing thing. It in part depends on our perception or conception, large part, of our station. So what fundamentally differentiates Islam from modernity or Islam from Muslim modernism is our conception of our station in this world, that is Maqam, and Hal is how we find ourselves in this world, or our being in this world. That is Hal. So Maqam, conception of Maqam determines our Hal. And in its basic Islamic conception of human station or Maqam is that we are creatures and bondsmen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our basic maqam is abdiyat. And obviously Allama Iqbal himself has explained this beautifully in his verse, his poetry. But here, and even in poetry he has a different conception as well. So that's why Allama Iqbal is so rich and cool. So our station in this world is that we are slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are his creatures. We are his bondsmen and bondswomen. And we are Muslim in this sense that we willingly surrender our will to his might and his love and his command. And if this is your conception of your station, you will know that everything else has the same status. They are one way or another, one form or another, everything in this world, from a straw to stone to plant to complicated and huge galaxies, they are all creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are all abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are all under his command. Tawan wa karhan. So if then your hal would be one of peace. Obviously, hal has different gradation as the our understanding of a maqam has different gradation, and gradation is one of the fundamentals of Islamic worldview. So according to our realization of our maqam, our hal would be that of peace, total peace, itminan, contentment. Ala bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Be aware that only the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives complete contentment to the hearts. And zikr, this remembrance, include the realization of our station in this universe. So our hal is that of contentment, peace, and friendship, and basic camaraderie with everything else in this world. There's no confrontation really. There's no enmity. There's no animosity. There's no imposition of will, except as practical weakness or something. That's why there are gradation of understanding and gradation of being in this world. It's always imperfect, as we know. But from the fundamental conception, that's what it is, or it should be. On the other hand, if your conception of your station in this world is that you are master of this universe, potential or actual, it doesn't matter whether you have made yourself master of this universe or you think that God has made you the master of this universe. And the main thing is to impose your will on this universe and realize yourself. So that's your station. Then your hal or your being in this world would be restlessness, lack of peace. As Quran say, haluan jazua, haluan and jazua, restless, not in peace with yourself and the universe. So restlessness is the real hal of those people. So this is the station of modernity, a modernist. And this is the hal of a modernist. Whether you are a secular modernist or Muslim modernist or Christian modernist, it doesn't matter. And Allama Iqbal here realizes that, but he thinks that this is a good thing. That's what it should be. Yeah. So yeah. Let's go back to the text. So this is what Iqbal is getting at, as we'll see. His conception of a station of human being is that of a modernist. And his conception of the being of human being in this world is also modernist. The only difference between him and modernists in this work and in this chapter, in these specific discussion is that of a Muslim modernist. And the only difference is that he is justifying those conceptions according to the Quranic verses and mainly distortion of the Quranic verses and their meaning, as compared to your normal modernist who will do that in secular terms or maybe Christian terms, etc. Ya Allah, Bismillah. So, such being nature and promise of the universe, what is the nature of man whom it confronts on all sides? The relationship is confrontation. Endowed with the most suitable mutual adjustment of faculties, that is powers. He has been given power to conquer the world by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. According to Allama Iqbal, he discovered himself down below in the scale of life. Why? Because he has shunned his duty to impose his will on the universe. And that's why he finds himself surrounded on all sides by the forces of obstruction. And last time I kept saying Surah Al-Alaq, I don't know why, but it's Surah Al-Teen. And we discussed that of the goodliest fabric we created in man, then brought him down to the lowest of the low. But Allama Iqbal is misinterpreting this in terms of the fact that if human beings study the universe and discover its secret, they are able to impose their will on this universe and subjugate this will. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to, according to it. Then they are in the highest plane of their station on the highest peaks, one with or even above Malaika, I guess, and close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his conception. But if they don't study the universe, then the universe dominates them, and that's what the lowest of the low. But obviously this is not what ayah says. We become the highest when we surrender our will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and find peace in surrendering our will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we try to impose our will on ourselves and the world around us, then we play the game of shaitan, and then we become the lowest of the low. So then Allama Iqbal asked the question, And how do we find him, that is human being, in this environment as a restless? See, so he realizes that the hall is of restlessness, but that's not the natural hall. This human beings are restless, according to Iqbal, because they want to impose their will on the universe, but they can't. So they are restless and they won't stop until their will is done. Strange caricature of thy will come. So Allama Iqbal realizes that human beings are restless, but he doesn't realize that they are restless exactly for the opposite reasons. They are restless because they aren't content with their station, which is the station of being creatures of Allah. A restless being engrossed in his ideals. I guess the ideal of imposing his will on the universe, to the point of forgetting everything else, capable of inflicting pain on himself in his ceaseless quest for the fresh scene scope of self-expression. And the self-expression, the conception of modernist self-expression is to realize human sovereignty in terms of the imposition of his or her will on the universe. But as we saw, Quranic conception is totally diametrically opposed to it. Anyway, we'll stop here and we'll continue from here next time, inshallah ta'ala.